So I said I also wanted to talk about Ronald Reagan, and I think that this is a really important issue also. In the Washington Post today, Julian Zelizer is reminding us of the 80s. Now, in 1978, Louise and I went off to New Hampshire. We left Michigan. We sold our business and moved to New Hampshire and started a community for abused kids and lived out in the woods. We bought 136 acres up on a 2,000-acre lake up in north central New Hampshire near Plymouth, and built a bunch of houses and did this thing. And this organization lasted well over 30 years, and something we're in retrospect very proud of. But while we were there for the 5 years that we ran that program, we were taking a paycheck of $25 a month, or no, $25 a week, excuse me, and plus room and board, and basically living off our savings and making the program happen. And the program, because we were dealing with really troubled kids, we did not have television because we found that it just tended to jack kids up. And so, there wasn't much radio there, and I didn't subscribe to any newspapers. And so for much of 79, 80, 81, and early 82 anyway, I really was somewhat disconnected from what was going on. I remember the Reagan election, and I remember being horrified by it. I remember some details, but Julian Zelizer really is kind of reminding us of this, which raises a really interesting question. He says, Ronald Reagan, his approval ratings fell. Remember, I keep saying Trump, maybe Trump is going to be Hitler. I think it's more likely he's going to be Reagan. And I'm seeing Reagan all over the Trump presidency. So anyhow, he says Ronald Reagan's approval ratings fell from 51% his first year as president to a meager 34% by 1982. Reagan triggered an international uproar when he insisted on the deployment of 572 intermediate-range nuclear-force missiles in Western Europe. When Reagan moved forward with his plan, there was an outcry from New York to the streets of Paris. On July 12th, 1982, almost 1 million people came to protest in New York City. That's, by the way, almost twice as many as in D.C. here a couple of weeks ago, to express their support for freezing the production of nuclear weapons and state their anger about Reagan. The problem? This built Reagan's support among Republicans. While Democrats saw a renegade president whose bombast threatened to trigger a nuclear war, writes Julian Zelizer, many Republicans saw a heroic leader who is standing up to the evils of communism and taking on all of his opponents, whether they were in Congress, on the streets, or in the media. Reagan found a way to use the protesters filling the streets to his advantage, depicting them as one more opponent to the national interest that he was willing to take on. Reagan came off as unpredictable, aggressive, and unschooled, not to mention suffering from a low approval rating throughout his first term and facing popular protests just like Trump. Okay, just to finish up my Reagan rant here, this was Julian Zelizer. He's talking about how basically Trump could do the same thing Reagan did. And frankly, I would tell you, and I've been saying this for 3 weeks, he is doing the same thing Reagan did. And he's and Drudge is helping him. I mean, over the last couple of days, Drudge has been running a headline about, Fight Club starts to teach liberals how to beat up conservatives. You click on the link, and it's a self-defense club in San Francisco, so you can keep from getting beat up by conservatives. Now he's got a headline that says, Republicans afraid for their fear for their safety. Right? And it's pointing to a Politico article where Republicans are like freaking out. These poor snowflake Republicans, right? They're freaking out that people are showing up at their town halls saying, hey, don't take away my health care. So there's an interesting question here, and I think it's an important one, and that is this a repeat of the Reagan era? Is Donald Trump going to change? Keep in mind, Ronald Reagan was, as President Barack Obama pointed out, one of the most consequential presidents in the 20th century, in that he rolled back and set in motion major rollbacks of large parts of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society and FDR's New Deal. And nobody has reversed any of that. Bill Clinton didn't reverse any of it. Barack Obama didn't reverse any of it. And of course, neither of the George Bushes reversed any of it. And Trump isn't going to too. So how much farther down this road is he going to take us? You know, Reagan wanted to take us back to 1953. Trump increasingly sounds like he wants to take us back to 1890. Before the progressive eruptions, before the union movements, maybe 1880. But the difference between now and 1980 is that in 1980, there was nobody in living, nobody alive who really had a clear recollection of the last time a revolutionary had been elected. That was Harding in 1920. It had been 60 years. Anybody who had any real awareness of Harding would have been 80 years old. They weren't being listened to when Reagan was elected. But now there are people, there's a large cohort of people, mostly boomers and one generation, what are they, Gen Xers, I guess, who remember what happened in the 1980s. And now have social media. Now we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got chat rooms, we've got all this stuff. So the question I put to you is it possible that Donald Trump is going to successfully repeat Ronald Reagan's presidency and maybe even have 8 years because he will successfully paint all those protests against him as, oh, those people, right, as the opposition and the media. I mean, Kellyanne Conway's already come out and said, or no, maybe it was Steve Bannon. The media is the enemy here, or is the opposition party, I think he said. So, which is it going to be? Well, I honestly don't know the answer to that.